Flight maneuvering load acceleration limits. Clean configuration. 1G to plus 2.5 G. Other configurations. 0G to plus 2G. Airport operations and wind limitations. Runway slope, plus or minus 2%, runway altitude, 9,200 feet, nominal runway width, 45 meters. Wind for takeoff and landing. Maximum demonstrated crosswind takeoff and landing. 38 knots gust included. Maximum demonstrated crosswind takeoff and landing. Tailwind takeoff. Maximum tailwind for takeoff. 10 knots. Tailwind landing. Maximum tailwind for landing. 15 knots. For landing with a tailwind greater than 10 knots, use flaps full only. Passenger and cargo doors operation. The following are the wind limitations for passenger and cargo doors operation. The maximum wind for passenger door operation is 65 knots. The maximum wind for FWD and aft cargo door operation is 40 knots or 50 knots, if the aircraft nose is into the wind, or if the FWD and aft cargo doors are on the leeward side. The FWD and aft cargo doors must be closed before the wind speed exceeds 65 knots. Cockpit window open maximum speed. 200 knots. Maximum operating speed VMO, MMO. VMO 350 knots. MMO 0.82. Maximum speeds with the landing gear extended. Maximum speed with the landing gear extended VLE. 280 knots, M 0.67. Maximum speed at which the landing gear may be extended VLO extension. 250 knots, M 0.60. Maximum speed at which the landing gear may be retracted VLO retraction. 220 knots, M 0.54. Maximum tire speed. 195 knots. Taxi speed. When the takeoff weight is higher than 76,000 kilograms. Do not exceed a taxi speed of 20 knots during a turn. Wipers maximum operating speed. 230 knots. Note: this limitation is applicable when the wipers are sweeping. It is not applicable if the wipers are not sweeping for any reasons. Aircraft weight limitation. Maximum taxi weight. 78,400 kilograms. Maximum takeoff weight, brake release. 78,000 kilogram. Maximum landing weight. 66,000 kilogram. Maximum zero fuel weight. 62,500 kilogram. Minimum weight. 37,230 kilograms. In exceptional cases in flight turn back or diversion, an immediate landing at weight above maximum landing weight is permitted, provided the pilot follows the overweight landing procedure. With passengers on board, it is not recommended to exceed 20 minutes without air conditioning supply. The lack of fresh air supply will significantly reduce the cabin's air quality. APU bleed use with HP Air Start Unit. The flight crew must not use bleed air from the APU bleed and from the HP Air Start Unit at the same time, to prevent any adverse effect on the bleed air system. Avionics ventilation. During ground operations and depending on the outside air temperature, the flight crew must limit the time that the aircraft electric power supply is used, in normal avionics ventilation system configuration, as follows. OAT less than 49 degrees Celsius. No limitation. From 49 degrees Celsius to 55 degrees Celsius. 2 hours. From 55 degrees Celsius to 60 degrees Celsius. 1 hour. From 60 degrees Celsius to 64 degrees Celsius. 0.5 hour. Cabin pressure. Maximum positive differential pressure. 9.0 psi. Maximum negative differential pressure. -1.0 psi. Safety relief valve setting. 8.6 psi. Max cabin altitude selection. 14,000 feet. Cabin altitude warning. 9,550 feet. Maximum normal cabin altitude. 8,000 feet. Minimum cabin altitude selection. -2,000 feet. Outflow valve closure. 15,000 feet. Note: maximum differential pressure and safety valve setting tolerance equals 0.1 psi. PAX use with LP air conditioning unit. The flight crew must not use conditioned air from the PAX and from the LP air conditioning unit at the same time, to prevent any adverse effect on the air conditioning system. Autopilot function. The autopilot can be used with the following minimum values. At takeoff. 100 feet AGL and at least 5s after liftoff. In approach with FG/S mode. 200 feet AGL. In approach with final AP, V, S or FPA mode. 250 feet AGL. In circling approach. 500 feet AGL for aircraft category C, 600 feet AGL for aircraft category D. ILS, MLS approach when CAT-1 is displayed on the FMA. 160 feet AGL. ILS, MLS approach when CAT-2 or CAT-3 single or CAT-3 dual is displayed on the FMA. 0 feet AGL if autoland. GLS approach when CAT-1 is displayed on the FMA. 160 feet AGL. GLS approach when autoland is displayed on the FMA. 0 feet AGL if autoland. LPV approach with SLS when approach 1 is displayed on the FMA. 160 feet AGL. After a manual go-around. 100 feet AGL. In all other phases. 500 feet AGL. The AP or FD in open descend or descend mode can be used in approach. However, its use is only permitted if the FCU selected altitude is set to, or above, the higher of the two, MDA, MDH or 500 feet AGL. ILS Category 2. Minimum decision height. 100 feet. At least one autopilot must be engaged in approach mode, and CAT-2 or CAT-3 single or CAT-3 dual must be displayed on the FMA. For manual landing, AP should be disconnected no later than 80 feet AGL. ILS Category 3 Fail Passive Single. Minimum decision height. 50 feet. Autothrust must be used in selected or managed speed. At least one autopilot must be engaged in approach mode, and CAT-3 single or CAT-3 dual must be displayed on the FMA. ILS Category 3 Fail Operational Dual. Alert height. 100 feet. Autothrust must be used in selected or managed speed. Both autopilots must be engaged in approach mode, and CAT-3 dual must be displayed on the FMA. CAT-3 with DH. Minimum decision height. 22 feet. CAT-3 without DH. Minimum runway visual range. 75 meters. Engine out. CAT-2 and CAT-3 fail passive autoland are only approved in configuration full, and if engine out procedures are completed before reaching 1000 feet in approach. Maximum wind conditions for ILS, MLS Cat 2 or Cat 3 and for GLS Cat 1. Headwind 30 knots. Tailwind 10 knots. Crosswind 20 knots without automatic rollout, 15 knots with automatic rollout. Note: wind limitation is based on the surface wind reported by ATC. If the wind displayed on the ND exceeds the above noted autoland limitations, but the tower reports a surface wind within the limitations, then the autopilot can remain engaged. If the tower reports a surface wind beyond limitations, only Cat 1 automatic approach without autoland can be performed. Automatic landing. ILS, MLS Cat 2 and Cat 3 Autoland and GLS Cat 1 Autoland are approved in Config 3 and Config Full. Automatic landing is demonstrated with Cat 2 and Cat 3 Israeli new shekels per MLS beam and Cat 1 GLS beam. With a glide slope angle between -2.5 degrees and -3.15 degrees. With an airport elevation at or below 2,500 feet. With aircraft weight below the maximum landing weight. Automatic landing is not allowed below -1,000 feet pressure altitude. Automatic rollout performance is approved on dry and wet runways, but performance on contaminated runways was not demonstrated. During automatic rollout with one engine inoperative or one thrust reverser inoperative, the flight crew can use the remaining thrust reverser, provided that no more than idle thrust is used. The wind does not exceed the maximum wind conditions for automatic rollout. APU start. After 3 consecutive APU start attempts, the flight crew must wait 60 minutes before a new start attempt. Rotor speed. Maximum end speed 107%. EGT. Maximum EGT for APU start below 35,000 feet 1090 degrees Celsius. Maximum EGT for APU start above 35,000 feet 1120 degrees Celsius. Maximum EGT for APU running 675 degrees Celsius. Maximum EGT for APU start below 35,000 feet 1090 degrees Celsius. Maximum EGT for APU start above 35,000 feet 1120 degrees Celsius. Maximum EGT for APU running 675 degrees Celsius. APU start, shutdown during refueling, defueling. During refuel, defuel procedures, APU starts or shutdown are permitted with the following restrictions. If the APU failed to start or following an automatic APU shutdown, do not start the APU. If a fuel spill occurs, perform a normal APU shutdown. APU bleed. Max altitude to assist engine start. 20,000 feet. Max altitude for air conditioning and pressurization single pack operation. 22,500 feet. Max altitude for air conditioning and pressurization dual pack operation. 15,000 feet. APU operation and normal restart limit. -2,000 feet to 41,000 feet. APU battery start limit elec Emmer config. 25,000 feet. Bleed air and elec power. Up to 22,500 feet. Elec power only. From 22,500 feet to 41,000 feet. Use of APU bleed air for wing anti-ice is not permitted. Thrust setting, EGT limit. Takeoff and go around. All engine operative, 5-minute, 950 degree. One engine inoperative, 10-minute, 950 degree. Maximum continuous thrust. No time limit, 915 degree. Starting engine, 725 degree. Shaft speeds. Maximum N1. 104%. Note: the N1 limit depends on the ambient conditions and on the configuration of the engine air bleed. These parameters may limit N1 to a value that is less than the above-mentioned N1 value. Maximum N2. 105%. Oil. Oil temperature. Maximum continuous temperature. 140 degrees Celsius. Maximum transient temperature 15 minutes. 155 degrees Celsius. Minimum starting temperature. -40 degrees Celsius. Minimum temperature before takeoff. -10 degrees Celsius. Oil quantity. Minimum oil quantity. 9.5 quarts plus estimated consumption. Average estimated consumption equals 0.5 quarts per hour. Minimum oil pressure, 13 psi. Starter. A standard automatic start that includes up to 3 start attempts is considered one cycle. For ground starts automatic or manual, a 20s pause is required between successive cycles. A 15 minutes cooling period is required, subsequent to 4 failed cycles. The starter must not be run when N2 is above 20%. Reverse thrust. Selection of the reverse thrust is prohibited in flight. Backing the aircraft with reverse thrust is not permitted. Maximum reverse should not be used below 70 knots. Idle reverse is permitted down to aircraft stop. Maximum altitude flaps, slats extended. 20,000 feet. Minimum fuel quantity for takeoff. 1,500 kilograms. The ECAM alerts that are related to fuel low level in the wing tank's fuel wing tank low level, etc. must not appear for takeoff. Definition of icing conditions. Icing conditions exist when the OAT on ground or after takeoff or the TAT in flight is at or below 10 degrees Celsius and visible moisture in any form is present, such as clouds, fog with visibility of 1 statute mile 1,600 meters or less, rain, snow, sleet or ice crystals. Icing conditions also exist when the OAT on the ground and for takeoff is at or below 10 degrees Celsius and operating on ramps, taxiways or runways where surface snow, standing water or slush may be ingested by the engines, or freeze on engines, nacelles or engine sensor probes. Definition of severe ice accretion. Ice accretion is considered severe when the ice accumulation on the airframe reaches approximately 5 mm (0.2 in) thick or more. Definition of thin hoarfrost. Thin hoarfrost is typically a white crystalline deposit which usually develops uniformly on exposed surfaces on cold and cloudless nights. It is so thin that surface features lines or markings can be distinguished beneath it. Rain repellent. The flight crew should only use the rain repellent in the case of moderate to heavy rain. Braking system. The braking system is not designed to hold the aircraft in a stationary position when a high thrust level is applied on at least one engine. During ground procedures that require a thrust increase with braking, the flight crew must ensure that the aircraft remains stationary, and must be ready to immediately retard the thrust levers to idle. Brake temperature. Maximum brake temperature for takeoff. Brake fans off. 300 degrees Celsius. NOSEWHEEL steering. NWS. Maximum nosewheel steering angle. 85 degrees. Taxi with deflated or damaged tires. To vacate the runway or taxi at low speed with tire deflated not damaged, all of the following limitations apply. If maximum 1 tire per gear is deflated, consider 3 gears. Maximum taxi speed during turn. 7 knots. If 2 tires are deflated on the same main gear, maximum 1 main gear. Maximum taxi speed. 3 knots. For the nosewheel steering angle. Maximum nosewheel steering angle. 30 degrees. In addition, if tire damage is suspected, the flight crew must ask for an aircraft inspection prior to vacate the runway or taxi. If the ground crew suspects that a tire burst may damage the landing gear, maintenance action is due. Oxygen. On ground, ref temperature equals OAT plus cockpit temp and divided by 2. In flight, ref temperature equals cabin temp minus 10 degrees Celsius, or the most demanding case among the following: protection after loss of cabin pressure, with mask regulator on normal diluted oxygen. During emergency descent for all flight crew members and observers for 13 minutes. During cruise at flight level 100 for 2 flight crew members for 107 minutes. Protection against smoke with 100% oxygen for all flight crew members and observers during 15 minutes at 8,000 feet cabin altitude.